this week's Drive, we ride along with the longest crash of the year, do more than scratch the bodywork at Le Mans, watch the world champion-elect track test his leathers, and ride the mean streets of the toughest track in the world. All this and more in this week's Drive. We start this week with a look at the race within a race that happens dozens of times in each Formula One Grand Prix. In the battle for points, places and podiums, it's not only the best car and driver that determine the winner. Formula One is very much a team sport. Every bit as much as the men in the cars, these men battle for tenths of a second too. Places are won and lost depending on how they perform. The whole team must work together seamlessly and without a hitch. They refuel the car and change all 4 tyres in well under 10 seconds. And for the drivers, the smallest mistake can undo all their hard work, so they pay special attention to what's going on while they're stationary.
Of course you notice it, and those 7 or 10 seconds last ages if you're sitting in your car itching to get away. It seems like an eternity. But you do get time to glance around and you can see in the mirrors if things are going okay or not. As a rule, though, our team is very good.
But who actually does what in those action-packed 10 seconds? As the car stops at exactly the right spot, the front jackman lifts up the nose, and his colleague at the back does the same. Heavy refueling hose not only delivers a measured 12 litres per second, but also evacuates highly flammable fumes. And as a precaution, there's always someone nearby with a fire extinguisher. The wheel gun man removes a safety clip and the central wheel nut. There are 3 men to each wheel, 1 to lift off the old rim, 1 to position the new one. In case the engine stalls, a crew member stands by with a remote starter. The pit stop is controlled by the man with the lollipop stick. He waits to see that all 4 tyre crews and the refueling hose are clear before lifting his lollipop and sending the car back out onto the track. Constant practice is needed, but sometimes things can go wrong.
Not that often, you know, sometimes you're a bit short, sometimes, you know, a bit late, sometimes you can slow down too much. It's, you know, it's never perfect. The thing is, you gotta try to do it as fast as you can with it screwing up. So if you're too slow, you screw up, and if you're too fast, you screw up. So it's a nice medium to like.
After the stop, it's back out to the battle on the track, hopefully ahead of the competition, who, of course, are trying to do just the same. All the rival teams have dedicated squads of technicians who are drilled to almost military efficiency. They practice tyre changing and refueling repeatedly, as well as the speedy changing of nose cones, as front wings are often the casualty of contact between cars.
Things have changed a bit this year, as the speed limit in pit lane has increased to 100 kilometres an hour. So you need less time per stop, as after all, pit stops aren't just about the car being stopped and refueled or tyres being changed. They're also about driving in and out of the pit lane. As a result, there's a tendency to stop more often.
Pit stop strategy, the number of stops in a race, is decided beforehand, depending upon the speed penalty of the weight of extra fuel, balanced against the time lost in slowing down, stopping and returning to the track.
The critical decisions are when you have something happen on the circuit, such as an accident or rain, and for some reason the lap times have changed or a pace car comes out. These are the ones that you have to make within 30 seconds. And then these are the ones that are quite difficult to make, but that's what we do.
The team's engineers can predict fuel consumption, speed differentials and the cost of stopping. So when the winning driver thanks his team, it really is because teamwork is the only way to win races. With 7 wins and 1 crash from 8 starts, Michael's team, and Rubens too, would seem to be getting it all right. Ferrari's lead is already looking crushing, double their nearest rival just halfway through the season, as the others scrabble for second place. It was a cloudy day as the stock cars prepared to roar around the 1-mile track known as the Monster Mile. The race was started by a veteran of the D-Day landings in France on the 60th anniversary of the World War II action. But after only 11 laps, the monster bit Casey Mears, who spun and hit the inside wall. But it was going to get worse.
Down to the bottom of the racetrack, and everyone will get by without incident as the caution waves. For the first time
on lap 38, Kurt Busch tapped the back of Elliott Sadler in car number 38. Sadler spun and Brendan Gaughan couldn't avoid him. Jamie McMurray was luckier as he was able to drive around Sadler.
That was a good move. Yeah, it looked like Kurt Busch tapped the back of the 38.
Later, on lap 321, Ryan Newman headed into pit road much too hot, picked up debris, dirt and marbles of worn rubber on his worn tyres, and his car made a direct hit on the tyre barrier at the entrance to the pit road.
So we'll see how this sorts out with scoring. And
then the big crash. On lap 346, Dave Blaney in car number 23 moved to his right to give another car room, but he tapped into Michael Waltrip. That sent Blaney spinning, which created a domino effect and a crash that involved a staggering 17 cars. Those drivers caught up in the multi-car wreck included NASCAR winners aplenty: Jimmy Johnson, Dave Blaney, Jeremy Mayfield, Greg Biffle, Ricky Rudd, Kevin Harvick, Ryan Newman, Michael Waltrip and many others. Rookie Casey Kane, who was going for his first ever NASCAR victory, was leading with 18 laps to go when he went off and hit the outside wall hard. 4 cars were involved in that crash, which resulted in a red flag that lasted 20 minutes, the second stoppage of the race. After the restart, Mark Martin won a spirited run to the checkered flag. Second by a fraction from Dale Earnhardt was Tony Stewart, in contention only because he made a blunder that left him so far behind that he missed the 17-car pileup. The 45-year-old Martin broke a 72-race, 4-year-long winless streak as he took the checkered flag, his 4th at the Dover track.
The celebration is well underway here in victory.
We crossed the Atlantic for the 72nd running of the famous 24 Hours of Le Mans, where Britain's Johnny Herbert and Alan McNish continued their friendly rivalry, with each hoping to lead Audi to its 4th victory in the last 5 24-hour races. The 2 Audi R8s, entered by British team Velox, dominated practice and started from the front row as the world's most famous endurance race began at 4 p.m. local time. Last year's winner, Bentley, didn't enter a team to defend the title. Audi, who also hadn't entered a factory team, were looking to the Audi Sport Japan team led by Seiji Ara and his Danish teammate Tom Christensen, who was trying to equal Belgian legend Jackie Ickx's record of 6 Le Mans victories. Christensen's part in Bentley's triumph last year made him the first man to win the race 4 years in a row. Briton Jamie Davis, teamed with Herbert and Guy Smith, made the quicker start. McNish was second with teammates 3-time winner Frank Biela and Pierre Caffer. Former Formula One driver JJ Lehto was in 3rd. But McNish and Lehto slid on oil and hit each other on the 29th lap. Both cars finished in a tyre barrier and the race was stopped. The 2 drivers got back to the pits, but doctors banned McNish from driving again after he collapsed, so the British team had to rely on only 2 drivers for the rest of the race. This promoted the Audi Japan team, but Italy's Rinaldo Capello slid off the track and dropped to 13th. Christensen took the car into the lead on Sunday morning, but another setback hit. The vehicle burst into flames during a pit stop. The Pescarolo Judd of Frenchman Sohail Ayari, Eric Comas and Benoit Traloya took advantage of Audi's mishaps to slip into 2nd place. Meanwhile, the other Audi, driven by Herbert, remained in the lead and seemed destined to cruise to victory. But the 24-hour race is draining on men and machines, and the race isn't over until 4 p.m. on Sunday. Herbert's team was slowed by unscheduled repairs, and that allowed the Audi Japan team to take the lead. Herbert was closing the gap at about 4 seconds a lap, and with 30 minutes to go, both cars stopped for a dash of fuel. With 15 minutes left, the gap was down to less than 30 seconds. And then with 7 minutes to go, Herbert threw the number 88 car across the gravel, and it was all over. Seiji Ara brought it home, the first Japanese driver to take the checkered flag at Le Mans, and giving Tom Christensen a record-tying 6th victory. The team completed a record 379 laps of the 13.6-kilometre circuit in 24 hours, bettering Bentley's record last year by 2 laps. Audi claimed the first 3 places, with Herbert's team 41 seconds behind in second and Leto third, 11 laps down. After some hair-raising crashes at the Texas Motor Speedway in the past year, there have been $1.7 million spent on safety improvements at the superfast track. Dario Franchitti had pole position at 209.6 miles an hour, 13 miles an hour slower than Gilles de Ferran in the series finale in October. AJ Foyt and Ed Carpenter hit the new safer barriers, or so-called soft walls, installed since last October's race. Less than 2 laps after that caution, something broke on Carpenter's car and it slammed into the 4th turn wall and burst into flames. There were just 2 wheels left on the car after it slid along the whole of the front straight and came to rest on the infield grass. Although Carpenter worryingly stayed in the blazing wreckage, he was not injured and eventually walked away from his car, which was a total loss.
There was some damage done to his car upon that impact. You know, we talked about the contact on the right rear.
Dan Weldon and Helio Castroneves had been 1-2 at the restart, but both were trying to make the last 72 laps without a stop. They didn't have enough fuel to keep up the pace and finish the race. Tony Kanaan regained the lead with 12 laps left and held off teammate Dario Franchitti to win by 1/4 of a second. It was the 2nd win of the season for Kanaan and 3rd in the IRL. He took over the series points lead from Weldon, who led by just 1 point going into the race.
And with that, Tony Kanaan will take the IRL IndyCar Series points lead. Wow.
The French round marked the midway point of the motocross season on one of the hottest days of the year. With an extremely dry and dirty track, the choice of tyres will be crucial in the outcome of both races. Local French favourite Michael Pichon was on pole for the first moto. Now fully recovered from a career-threatening injury, the Honda rider established an early rhythm as he swept around the tight course and looked set to reproduce his winning form from the previous round, the British Grand Prix, a week earlier. In pursuit of Pichon was championship leader Stefan Everts, who timed his race to perfection. He took the lead on lap 6 and never looked back. Everts rode clear of Pichon and held on for a comfortable victory, 5 seconds ahead, with Joshua Coppins of New Zealand 3rd. Everts made it a double in the second moto with an even more emphatic victory after Pichon was forced to retire on the 2nd lap when a flying stone smashed a brake coupling on his bike. Remarkably, Belgian rider Cedric Malot was also forced out when a stone smashed his brake pedal. Coppins was 2nd, but the 7-times world champ Everts won with over 6 seconds to spare and now leads the series by a massive 82 points. Meanwhile, just over the border, MotoGP Championship leader Sete Gibernau set the fastest time in Friday's qualifying session for the Catalunya Grand Prix in Barcelona in Spain, but only after crashing out in the first qualifying session. The Spaniard recovered from his early spill and rode his spare Honda to a new pole record at the Circuit de Catalunya. The next day, he trimmed more than 1/3 of a second off his own record time to clinch pole position on his final lap of the session. Gibernau's main rival, reigning champion Valentino Rossi, would start the race from 2nd place on the grid. Rossi, winner at his home Grand Prix in Italy a week before, was the only other rider to get under the 1-minute 43-second mark. Young American Nicky Hayden went 3rd fastest in practice to complete the front row of the grid. Rossi's former Honda teammate climbed 2 places with a time 0.2 of a second slower than the new Yamaha signing. Italian Max Biaggi failed to improve on his time from Friday's qualifying session, but a mark of 1-minute 43.5 was enough to take 4th place on the grid. Randy Depunier could only manage 2nd fastest in Friday's qualifying session, but the 250cc championship leader climbed pole on Saturday. Daniel Pedrosa was relegated to 2nd place by the Frenchman, while Sebastian Porto and Alex De Angelis completed the front row. 17-year-old sensation Jorge Lorenzo continued to lead the way in the 125s. The Spanish Derby rider finished just under 3/4 of a second ahead of Hector Barbera, while Casey Stoner and Pablo Nieto took third and fourth on the front row. In the MotoGP race, Rossi made a great start and sailed on the inside of Gibernau to take the lead on the first corner. From then on, it was almost impossible to chart the leader as the two traded first place several times each lap. Former champion Kenny Roberts ripped up a rear tyre and stopped for a new one. Alex Barros accelerated too early while third, sliding off into the gravel, but he was unhurt. Makoto Tamada suffered rear tyre failure for the second race in a row. As Rossi and Gibernau scrapped, Marco Melandri shook off Max Biaggi to claim third place ahead of fellow Yamaha rider Carlos Checa to make it 3 M1s in the top 4. Title contender Biaggi dropped back as he also suffered tyre problems, losing a place on each of the final 3 laps to cross the line 8th. But he was having a much better day than Australian Troy Bayliss, who was in the thick of a hectic 5-man skirmish for 5th when he touched Ruben Zaus and fell with 4 laps to go. Amazingly, he was only battered and bruised. Gibernau, born and raised just down the road in Barcelona, did all he could in front of a record crowd of 102,000, but he couldn't prevent a late charge from Rossi, who made his final pass with 2 laps to go and took the flag by just 0.159 of a second. It was his 62nd career victory. Melandri clinched his first MotoGP podium in a lonely 3rd place, and the next day underwent surgery for a pumped-up right forearm.
Yes, for sure it's a surprise for us, especially because with 2 long straight like in Mugello and here, where the power of Honda and the speed is a little bit more, for sure it's difficult to win. But we make 2 fantastic races. With my team, we work a lot. We use every minute of every practice for improve the bike. We work very well also with Michelin.
Biaggi now lies 21 points adrift of Rossi in 3rd place, with the world champion closing in to within 5 points of Gibernau. In the 5th World Championship event this season, Randy Depunier won the 250cc race from pole position in a thrilling duel with a determined Daniel Pedrosa, and Tony Elias finished 3rd. The top 2 are already opening up a gap in the chase to the World Championship. Pedrosa is the reigning 125 world champion. In the 125cc race, Hector Barbera recovered from a bad start to overtake Andrea Dovizioso on the last lap, winning by half of the length of his bike, with a top 6 within 0.8 of a second. Dovizioso also has a breathing space at the top of the title chase. The 4th round of the Speedway Grand Prix season was at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. The patchy, uneven track developed deep ruts, which caused plenty of dramas in the 25 heats. But despite the surface, Australians Jason Crump and Lee Adams started the day 2nd and 3rd in the championship and lined up with Greg Hancock and Lee Richardson in the final. Crump misjudged his start, edging forward early and losing concentration for the rest of the race. In contrast, Hancock made a brilliant start from the inside lane and grabbed an early lead, with Richardson in close pursuit. But Richardson hit a rut on the back straight on lap 2, and Adams cut inside the Briton to take 2nd place. Hancock could sense Adams closing in on him midway through lap 3 and tried desperately to hold off the Australian. Adams and Hancock were side by side at the start of the last lap, with Hancock holding the outside line. But Hancock lost control after hitting a rut while coming out of the final corner, and it appeared that Adams would take the Grand Prix victory. Yet the American stretched his throttle to the max and pipped Adams to the flag for his first win of the season. The victory in Wales lifts Hancock, the 1997 world champion, up into 4th place in the championship standings, and he and his supporters celebrated his win at full volume. Adams took 2nd place and Crump took 4th, which meant that both Australians would climb above Tony Ricardson, who failed to reach the semi-finals for a share of 1st place in the championship standings. The reigning world champion, Nicky Pedersen, is 22 points off the pace. Crowd favourite and local boy Lee Richardson, in his first ever Grand Prix final appearance, took 3rd place. The next round of the season moves to Copenhagen for the Danish Grand Prix. After a delay of 2 hours waiting for low cloud to clear off the Snaefell Mountain, the last ever ultra-lightweight 125cc and lightweight 400cc races got underway. The concurrent races were around the infamous 37-mile circuit that makes up the first 2 weeks of the Isle of Man Tourist Trophy. Last year's winner, Chris Palmer, led off the 125s. At the end of the first lap, Ian Luffer on bike 5 led the 125s, lapping at an average speed of exactly 109 miles an hour to lead Palmer by 4.4 seconds. After refueling stops, Luffer still led Palmer on time, but on the third lap, Palmer put in a fast lap to take the lead by 6.7 seconds. Luffer couldn't reply, and Robert Dunlop on bike 4 couldn't improve on his third place. Close to the end, Ian Luffer's bike broke down and Palmer streaked past the checkered flag at a record average speed of 110.5 miles an hour. Robert Dunlop finished in second place, 57.9 seconds down. In the bigger class, John McGuinness started first and pulled away, looking for his second win of the week. At the end of lap 3, he was 45 seconds up on Steve Linsdell. McGuinness never faltered and scored his second consecutive 400 victory, adding to his Formula 1 victory of 2 days earlier. Despite an unzipped boot, he maintained concentration to win by 33.2 seconds, a record average race speed of 110.28 miles an hour. Linsdell averaged 109.5, with Mark Parrott third on bike 49, 2.8 seconds back. The 4-lap senior TT was a happy hunting ground for Adrian Archibald from Balamoney riding a 1000cc GSXR Suzuki. On the opening lap, John McGuinness led by 10.6 seconds over Ian Luffer on a Honda and Archibald. Lap 2 saw McGuinness pile on the coals, but Archibald's chances of repeating his 2003 senior win were increased when McGuinness retired with clutch trouble on the third lap. But then, more drama. Luffer halted at Ramsey Hairpin. In a flash, Kiwi Bruce Anstey was in pursuit of his Irish teammate. With 3 laps done and just 1 to go, Archibald and Anstey were 1-2 for Suzuki, and Archibald had the added incentive of an extra £10,000 and the Joey Dunlop Trophy for the best aggregate over the Formula 1 and Senior. On the last lap, drizzle and rain on the mountain made things difficult, but a few minutes later, Archibald won his second consecutive Senior, with Anstey second and Gary Carswell third for an all-Suzuki podium. Archibald was 30.2 seconds clear of teammate Anstey after 150 miles flat-out racing, averaging 123.8 miles an hour. Many of the same names cropped up in the production 600 TT. Luffer set off in his Honda behind Archibald on his Suzuki, who was quite literally flying. Jason Griffiths would bring his Yamaha home in 4th place. Archibald was being chased by Luffer and that man McGuinness again. Archibald had a scary moment on the first lap when the bike went sideways and he had both feet off the pegs, and he opted for a safe 9th place. But on corrected time, Ryan Farquhar led on the first lap with John McGuinness 9/10 of a second behind after catching Ian Luffer on the road. On lap 2, Farquhar added another second to his lead, while Anstey had reduced the gap to McGuinness by 1 second. The Yamaha star visibly slower than his rivals and beginning to slip back, confirming later that his steering damper had broken halfway round the lap. After a disappointing week of retirements, Farquhar took his first TT win and gave Kawasaki their first TT victory since Jeff Johnson in 1984. Anstey took his 4th podium of the week, while McGuinness 3rd, disappointed after having led but pleased with another podium. Jason Griffiths was 2nd fastest on the final lap, enough to overhaul Ian Luffer. So whether you're heading back to the pits, wiping out half the field, or just road testing your leathers, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.